Black kid stands up to bullies. The entire school erupts when they see his power. The entire cafeteria fell silent. All eyes were locked on the two figures at the center of the chaos. Chase Reynolds, the untouchable golden boy of Lincoln Heights High, was on the ground, gasping for breath, his hands clutching his ribs. Towering over him was Jamal Carter, his breath steady, his fists clenched but relaxed. The same Jamal who had spent weeks ignoring every shove, every whispered insult, every so-called joke thrown his way. Now he wasn't ignoring anything. "You done?" Jamal's voice was calm, almost bored, as if he wasn't standing over the most feared kid in school, the son of the town's mayor, the guy who thought he was invincible. Chase coughed, his face twisted in shock and pain. No one had ever stood up to him like this. No one had ever dared. But Jamal wasn't just anyone. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating, before it shattered into an explosion of whispers and murmurs. Phones were pulled out. Some kids gasped. Others grinned, finally seeing someone put Chase in his place. And just like that, everything changed. The morning had started like any other. Jamal had woken up early, thrown on his hoodie, and stared at himself in the mirror for a long moment. Another new school, another set of people already deciding who he was before he even opened his mouth. He had been through this before. Lincoln Heights was different, though. It was the kind of town where everyone knew each other, where families had lived for generations. People like him, black kids from the city, didn't just fit in. They weren't supposed to. He felt it the second he stepped onto the school grounds, the way the conversations dipped when he walked past, the way people looked at him like he was a question they didn't want answered. Teachers were polite, too polite, their smiles forced. By lunchtime, he had settled into the quiet routine of being invisible. It was safer that way. Then Chase Reynolds happened. Jamal had just picked up his tray, scanning the room for a place to sit, when Chase's voice rang out. "You lost, new kid?" Jamal turned. Chase was leaning back in his seat, that signature smirk plastered on his face, his group of friends flanking him like bodyguards. Jamal wasn't stupid. He knew how this worked. Chase was the kind of guy who had never been told no, never had to deal with someone who didn't care about his status. He was used to people laughing at his jokes, even when they weren't funny. Jamal gave him a level look. "Didn't know I needed directions." Chase's smirk widened. "Just making sure. Not a lot of your kind around here." The table erupted in laughter. Jamal's grip on his tray tightened. This wasn't new. He had heard worse. So he walked away. He found a seat at the far end of the cafeteria, dropping his tray with deliberate ease. The whispers didn't stop, but he ignored them, focused on his food. Then the first blow came, a sharp tug at his hood. Jamal turned just in time to see a half-empty soda cup sailing toward him. It hit his shoulder, spilling sticky liquid down his sleeve. The cafeteria roared with laughter. Jamal set his fork down. Slowly, he turned. Chase stood there, arms crossed, looking down at him like a king surveying his kingdom. "My bad," he said, not sounding sorry at all. Jamal met his gaze, his expression unreadable. He could already hear his mother's voice in his head. "Don't start anything. Be smarter than them." Chase leaned in. "What? Nothing to say?" Silence stretched between them. Then Jamal stood up. He didn't say anything, didn't threaten, didn't yell. He just stepped forward, closing the space between them until Chase's cocky grin twitched. For the first time, Chase looked unsure. Jamal tilted his head. "You sure you want to do this?" The cafeteria had gone dead silent. Chase's bravado wavered, but he was too far in now. He shoved Jamal hard. "Yeah, I do." Jamal moved fast. 1 second, Chase was standing there, all arrogance and confidence. The next, Jamal's right hook connected with his ribs, knocking the air from his lungs. Chase stumbled back, gasping. Jamal didn't stop. He pivoted, his form perfect, clean, controlled, like every punch he had ever thrown in the boxing gym with his uncle. The uppercut landed with precision, snapping Chase's head back. His legs buckled, and then he was on the ground. That was when the cafeteria exploded. Screams, laughter, cheers. Jamal rolled his shoulders, adjusting his hoodie. His heart pounded, but his face was calm. He had given them nothing but the truth. Chase wanted a fight. So he got one. Chase groaned, rolling onto his side, clutching his ribs. Jamal stared down at him, his voice even. "You done?" No answer. Jamal looked at the others, Chase's crew, the kids who had laughed at him minutes ago. "Anyone else?" Silence. Then someone in the back of the cafeteria clapped. Another followed. And then, suddenly, the room erupted into cheers. For the first time, Lincoln Heights High saw who Jamal Carter really was, and they would never forget it. Jamal didn't check his phone that night. He didn't have to. By the time he walked into school the next morning, he knew everyone had seen the fight. Whispers followed him through the halls. Some kids glanced at him like he was some kind of urban legend. Others smirked, nodding in silent approval. A few freshmen even looked at him like he had superpowers. But Jamal wasn't looking for attention. He kept his head down, moving through the halls like nothing had changed. But everything had, especially for Chase Reynolds. Chase wasn't at school. That part didn't surprise Jamal. He had felt the impact of those punches, the way Chase crumbled. No way the kid was showing his face after getting dropped in front of half the cafeteria. What surprised him was how quiet Chase's crew was. Nick and Kyle, his two closest friends who had spent weeks laughing at Jamal, barely even looked at him. No snide comments, no sideways glances, nothing. Jamal didn't trust it. His uncle always told him, "A man who loses in public doesn't forget." Chase wasn't done, and that meant Jamal couldn't let his guard down. At lunch, he found his usual spot at the far end of the cafeteria. He wasn't sure what to expect, but as soon as he sat down, a shadow fell over his table. "You Carter?" Jamal looked up. A guy he hadn't seen before stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, with an easy confidence that wasn't forced. He didn't have Chase's cocky smirk. He didn't have to. Jamal nodded. "Yeah." The guy pulled out a chair, sitting across from him like they had been friends for years. "The name's Marcus. Heard you dropped Chase Reynolds." Jamal didn't respond. Marcus grinned. "Relax. I'm not here to fight. Just wanted to say that was the best thing I've seen all year." A few kids at nearby tables turned to listen. Jamal shifted, uncomfortable with the attention. Marcus leaned in. "I'm on the wrestling team. A few of the guys are saying you should come by after school. Coach is always looking for guys who can actually hold their own." Jamal raised an eyebrow. "I don't wrestle," Marcus smirked. "Not yet." Jamal exhaled, shaking his head. "I didn't fight him to impress anyone," Marcus leaned back. "That's what makes it even better. Look, you don't gotta prove anything to me, but if you ever get tired of being the new kid, you know where to find us." With that, Marcus stood and walked away, leaving Jamal with more questions than answers. Across the cafeteria, a few kids watched the exchange, their whispers growing louder. Jamal could feel the weight of the rumors already forming. And then someone else approached his table. A girl. Light brown skin, dark curls pulled back into a ponytail, piercing brown eyes that held zero fear. Jamal recognized her immediately. Maya Thomas. She was different from the other girls at Lincoln Heights. Smart, confident, the type of person who walked like she belonged anywhere she went. And right now she was staring at him like she was trying to figure him out. "Got a second?" she asked. Jamal nodded, still not sure where this was going. Maya didn't sit. She just folded her arms. "I saw what you did. Jamal sighed. Let me guess. You think I'm just another violent thug? Maya's expression didn't change. Number, I think you're exactly what this school needed. Jamal blinked. What? Maya leaned in. Chase has been running this place like he owns it for years, and no one has ever done what you did. Jamal frowned. So what? You want me to be some kind of hero? Maya smirked. Number, I just want to know what you're going to do next. Jamal didn't have an answer, because the truth was he hadn't thought that far ahead. After school, Jamal headed to the gym, not to wrestle, but just to clear his head. The weight room was mostly empty, just a few football players finishing up their workouts. He grabbed a set of dumbbells, focused on the steady rhythm of lifting, lowering, controlling his breath. This was something he could control. Then the door swung open. Jamal didn't even have to turn around. He felt who it was. Nick and Kyle, Chase's boys. Jamal set the weights down slowly, rolling his shoulders before facing them. Nick gave a casual grin, but there was something off about it. Kyle cracked his knuckles. You think this is over? Jamal didn't react. Nick took a step closer. You embarrassed Chase, that's a problem. Jamal exhaled. Sounds like Chase's problem, not mine. Kyle's jaw clenched. You think this is funny? Nick held out a hand. Relax, man. Carter's a smart guy. He knows how this works. No hard feelings, right? Jamal met his gaze, unblinking. Nick smirked. Good. So here's the deal. Chase's dad is the mayor. Which means if Chase says you threw the first punch, guess who the school is going to believe? Jamal felt his hands tighten into fists. Kyle grinned. We both know you ain't got a future here. But if you apologize, real public-like, maybe we can make this go away. Jamal laughed under his breath. You want me to apologize? Nick shrugged. Chase is giving you an out. Take it. Jamal shook his head. No. Kyle's smirk faltered. What? Jamal took a step forward. I said no. Nick's smile faded completely. Kyle's fists clenched. You don't get it, do you? Jamal's voice was calm, steady. No, Kyle, you don't get it. He took another step, and for the first time they moved back. Jamal nodded. That's what I thought. Nick forced a chuckle. This isn't over, Carter. Jamal tilted his head. I know. He turned his back on them, grabbed his bag, and walked out without looking back. Because this time he wasn't the one running, and he never would be again. Jamal walked into school the next morning knowing one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Nick and Kyle's warning had been clear. Chase Reynolds wasn't just licking his wounds in private. He was planning something. And Jamal knew enough about guys like Chase to understand that when they couldn't win a fight physically, they'd find another way. He just didn't know how soon it would happen. The first sign came in second period. Mr. Ellis, the history teacher, was in the middle of a lecture when the classroom door swung open. Principal Gardner stepped inside, flanked by a security officer. Jamal Carter, Gardner said, her voice firm. Come with us. Jamal felt every set of eyes in the room turn toward him. He kept his face blank, slowly closing his notebook before standing. He could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken assumptions. What did he do? Someone muttered. Jamal didn't react. He just grabbed his bag, nodded at Mr. Ellis, and walked toward the door. The hallway was empty as they led him toward the office. His mind was already working through the possibilities. He hadn't done anything wrong. Not yet. But Chase's dad was the mayor. That meant the truth didn't matter. When they reached the principal's office, Jamal stepped inside and immediately saw who was waiting for him. Chase. Sitting in a chair across from the desk, arms crossed, a bruised cut still visible on his jaw. Next to him, his father, Mayor Richard Reynolds. The man's suit was too perfect, his smile just a little too polished. He barely even looked at Jamal as he sat down. Principal Gardner folded her hands. Jamal, do you know why you're here? Jamal met Chase's smug expression, then turned back to the principal. "I have an idea," Gardner sighed. "We've received a formal complaint regarding your behavior. It seems there was a violent altercation in the parking lot." Jamal's stomach tightened. "Here it comes." Mayor Reynolds leaned forward, his tone mocking in its concern. "Jamal, son, this isn't about punishment. This is about making sure all students feel safe. My boy here," he patted Chase's shoulder, "is lucky his injuries weren't worse." Jamal almost laughed. Lucky? Chase had spent weeks trying to provoke him. He got what he deserved. But now the same kid who had shoved him first, tripped him in the cafeteria and poured soda all over him, was suddenly a victim? Jamal sat back, keeping his voice calm. "I was defending myself." Mayor Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "That's not what we were told." Jamal exhaled slowly. "And who exactly told you otherwise?" Chase smirked. "There were witnesses." Jamal clenched his jaw. "Of course there were. Chase's crew would say whatever he wanted them to say." Mayor Reynolds turned to Principal Gardner. "I'm afraid if we don't take action, we might be enabling a dangerous pattern." Gardner hesitated. "Jamal has no prior incidents of violence." Reynolds gave a sympathetic nod. "That may be true, but sometimes kids like him—" His gaze flicked over Jamal like he was something less than human. "Need a little extra discipline." Jamal felt the heat in his chest. Kids like him. He knew what that meant. He had spent his entire life knowing what that meant. Gardner cleared her throat. "Jamal, I think it would be best if you took a few days off, just to let things settle." Jamal stared at her. "You mean a suspension?" Gardner hesitated, then nodded. Chase grinned. Jamal exhaled sharply. "So let me get this straight. He starts a fight, I finish it, and I'm the one getting suspended." Mayor Reynolds didn't even try to hide his satisfaction. "Actions have consequences." Jamal let out a short, bitter laugh. "Yeah, just not for you." Gardner's voice was tight. "Jamal, please." Jamal turned to Chase. "You really couldn't handle losing, huh?" Chase shrugged. "You threw the first punch." Jamal shook his head. "That's a lie and you know it." Reynolds sighed. "The decision has been made." Jamal stood, leveling his gaze at them. He had been expecting a fight. But not this kind. Not the kind where the truth didn't matter. He took a deep breath. "Fine." Gardner looked relieved. Jamal looked at Chase one last time. He wanted to say something that would wipe the smug expression off his face. But he didn't, because Chase was still playing checkers. And Jamal was about to flip the whole board. The bus ride home was silent. His mom wasn't home yet, she worked late. But Jamal didn't go inside. Instead, he walked. He walked until his anger faded, until his breathing evened out, until he knew what he had to do. Marcus's words came back to him. Coach is always looking for guys who can hold their own. Jamal had spent years training how to fight. He knew how to hit, how to block, how to end a fight before it started. But maybe Marcus was right. Maybe it was time to start fighting for something bigger than himself. Maybe it was time to stop playing by their rules. When he finally pulled out his phone, he found Marcus's number. One text. That's all it took. "I'm in," Marcus replied instantly. "Wrestling tryouts tomorrow. Be ready." Jamal took a deep breath, staring at the screen. He wasn't just gonna be the new kid anymore. He was about to become something else entirely. And Chase Reynolds. He wasn't ready for what was coming next. Jamal stepped into the gym the next day, his heartbeat steady but his mind sharp. The wrestling tryouts were already in full swing. The thud of bodies hitting the mat, the sharp whistle of the coach, the grunts of competitors struggling for dominance. It was a different world, and today Jamal was stepping into it. Marcus spotted him from across the room and jogged over. Didn't think you'd actually show, he said, a grin spreading across his face. Jamal dropped his bag. I told you I was in. Marcus chuckled. All right then, let's see if you can back it up. Coach Reynolds, not Chase's dad, but his uncle, Coach David Reynolds, stood in the center of the gym, his arms crossed as he studied the group. He was built like a tank, with a sharp gaze that cut through any nonsense. All right, listen up, his voice boomed. Wrestling ain't about brute strength. It's about control. Control over yourself. Control over your opponent. You get that? Good. Now let's see what you got. The wrestlers paired off, and Jamal quickly noticed who was watching him. Nick and Kyle. They weren't trying out, but they were leaning against the wall, arms crossed, smirking like they were waiting for Jamal to fail. Jamal ignored them. Marcus nudged him. They're just mad because Chase is still home icing his ribs. Jamal smirked. Yeah, well, let's see if I can give them something else to talk about. Coach called out names, pairing wrestlers together. When he got to Jamal, he hesitated for a beat. You ever wrestled before? Jamal shook his head. No, sir. Coach nodded. All right, you're up against Brandon Jacobs. A murmur rippled through the group. Brandon was a senior, state-ranked and undefeated. Jamal felt Marcus stiffen beside him. Damn, Coach really wants to test you. Jamal didn't react. He stepped onto the mat. If they wanted to test him, so be it. Brandon smirked as they squared up. New kid, huh? Jamal nodded. Brandon cracked his neck. No hard feelings, all right? Jamal just lifted his hands. Let's go. The whistle blew. Brandon exploded forward, trying to take Jamal down fast. He went for the double leg takedown, aiming to use his weight to drive Jamal to the ground. But Jamal wasn't some easy target. He twisted his hips, sprawling instinctively out of the takedown, pushing Brandon's head down while keeping his balance. The gym went silent. Coach's eyebrows shot up. Brandon reset, circling. This time he didn't look as confident. Jamal could hear Marcus laughing from the sidelines. Oh, he's in trouble now. Brandon lunged again, trying to catch Jamal off guard. Jamal saw it coming. This time, when Brandon reached for his legs, Jamal countered with a swift sprawl, then a lightning-fast switch to a single-leg takedown of his own. The impact shook the mat. Brandon's back slammed down, and before he could react, Jamal had him locked in a tight half-Nelson, pinning him. The whistle blew. Winner, Jamal Carter. The entire gym erupted. Even the guys who had been skeptical were nodding, murmuring to each other. Who the hell was this kid? Brandon sat up, rubbing his jaw. He looked at Jamal and grinned. Damn, man. He shook his head. You sure you've never wrestled before? Jamal smirked. I learn fast. Coach Reynolds studied him. Then he nodded. You're on the team. Jamal exhaled. He had walked into that gym as the new kid. He was walking out as a contender. But what Jamal didn't know yet, what none of them knew, was that this wasn't just about wrestling. This was about power. And Chase Reynolds wasn't done with him yet. The hallway buzzed with conversation as Jamal walked to his locker the next morning. It wasn't just the usual murmurs. His name was everywhere. Yo, that new kid pinned Brandon Jacobs like it was nothing. He's got hands and skills. Damn. He's got to be hiding something. Nobody comes out of nowhere like that. Jamal didn't react. He was used to whispers. But this was different. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was respect. Marcus was waiting for him at his locker, leaning against the metal doors with a grin. Look at you, already famous. Jamal rolled his eyes. It's just wrestling. Marcus laughed. Tell that to the rest of the school. Jamal grabbed his books, closing the locker with a sharp click. Let them talk. Marcus shook his head. Nah, man, you don't get it. Chase is back today. Jamal stiffened for just a second. Marcus caught it. You knew this was coming. Jamal exhaled. Yeah, Chase Reynolds wasn't the type to let something like getting humiliated go unnoticed. And now, with Jamal stepping into his world, the wrestling team, the sport his family practically owned, it was only a matter of time before Chase made a move. The first sign came in the cafeteria. Jamal had barely taken a seat when the entire room went silent. It started like a ripple, conversations dying down table by table. Everyone knew something was about to happen. Then came the footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Chase Reynolds was making an entrance. The cafeteria doors swung shut behind him as he walked straight up to Jamal's table, his usual cocky grin replaced with something colder. He didn't come alone. His usual crew, Nick, Kyle, and a few other guys who acted more like bodyguards than friends, flanked him like a wall of intimidation. Jamal kept eating, unbothered. Chase tapped the table, making the tray rattle. Jamal Carter, Chase said smoothly, as if tasting the name. Didn't think we'd meet this soon. Jamal chewed his food, swallowed, looked up, calm, unshaken. Guess I saved you the trouble of looking for me. A few of Chase's friends chuckled, but Chase didn't. His eyes stayed locked on Jamal. You embarrassed me, Chase said, his voice just low enough that only their table could hear. Jamal took another bite of his sandwich. You embarrassed yourself. The entire table went tense. Chase's jaw tightened. You think one lucky punch makes you untouchable? Jamal wiped his mouth with a napkin and met Chase's gaze. I don't think about you at all. Chase's hands clenched into fists. For a second it looked like he might actually swing. Then the cafeteria doors opened again. Coach Reynolds, Jamal's uncle. Chase forced a smirk. Enjoy the attention while it lasts, he muttered, stepping back. Because soon, nobody's gonna remember your name. Jamal didn't react, but he knew a threat when he heard one. Jamal stayed late, training, preparing. He didn't like surprises, and Chase wasn't going to catch him off guard again. Each strike against the heavy bag was calculated. Precise. His muscles burned, sweat dripping down his back, but he pushed through. A lion doesn't flinch when the hyenas bark. His uncle's words echoed in his head. He didn't hear the gym door open, but he felt the presence. Coach Reynolds. He studied Jamal for a moment before speaking. You really shook things up around here. Jamal grabbed his water bottle, wiping the sweat off his forehead. I'm not trying to. Coach let out a short laugh. Kid, you think Chase is pissed because you beat him up? Number. He's pissed because you changed the game. Jamal frowned. I didn't do anything but stand up for myself. Coach nodded. Exactly. And that's the problem. Jamal narrowed his eyes. How's that a problem? Coach sighed, stepping closer. Because guys like Chase, they don't fight fair. Jamal's grip tightened on the water bottle. Coach exhaled. Look, I'm not saying don't stand your ground, but be ready. Because whatever's coming next, it won't be a clean fight. Jamal didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because he already knew. And when it came, he'd be ready. Jamal knew something was coming. Coach Reynolds's warning echoed in his mind as he walked through the school hallways the next morning. Chase wasn't done. People still whispered when he passed, but the energy was different now. It wasn't just curiosity. It was anticipation. The fight wasn't over. It hadn't even begun. Lunchroom showdown. Jamal had just sat down in the cafeteria when Marcus slid into the seat across from him. You hear? Jamal picked up his sandwich, unmoved. What? Marcus leaned forward. Chase challenged you. Jamal chewed slowly, not reacting. To what? Marcus raised his eyebrows. The wrestling team. Tryouts are today. Jamal finally looked up. And? Marcus gave him a look. And half the school is betting on whether or not you show up. Jamal set down his sandwich. I don't do things for other people. Marcus smirked. Sure, but Chase is making it real clear. He wants to prove he's better than you. Jamal exhaled. There it was. This wasn't about a school sport. This wasn't about skill. This was about control. Chase needed to win. He needed to erase what had happened in that parking lot. And the only way to do that was to beat Jamal in front of everyone. Jamal picked up his tray. Then I guess I'll have to remind him why he lost the first time. The wrestling room. The gym smelled like sweat and competition. Students crowded the bleachers, talking in hushed excitement. This wasn't just a normal practice. Jamal walked in, pulling his hoodie over his head. The moment Chase saw him, his smirk widened. Look who finally decided to show up. Jamal ignored him, walking over to Coach Harrison. The older man looked at him for a long moment before nodding. You sure about this? Jamal nodded. Yeah. Coach sighed. All right, then. You too, Center Matt? The gym went silent. Jamal stepped forward, rolling his shoulders. Chase did the same, bouncing lightly on his toes. He was confident, arrogant. He thought this was his domain. He thought he had the upper hand. He had no idea what was about to happen. The match begins. Coach's whistle blew. Chase lunged first, fast, aggressive, reckless. Jamal dodged, sidestepping easily. Chase circled, grinning. That all you got? Jamal didn't reply. He let Chase come to him. Another attack. Chase shot low, trying to grab Jamal's legs for a takedown. Mistake. Jamal sprawled, locked his grip around Chase's waist, and flipped him over in one smooth motion. The crowd gasped. Chase hit the mat with a grunt, scrambling to recover. Jamal didn't let him. He pressed down, keeping Chase pinned. Seconds passed. Coach's whistle pierced the silence. Point. Carter. The gym erupted. Chase's face burned with frustration as he pushed off the mat. Lucky. Jamal just shrugged. Again? Chase clenched his jaw. Yeah. Round 2. This time, Chase was careful. Jamal could see it in his stance, the way he hesitated. He wasn't used to losing, but hesitation was weakness. Jamal struck first. A fake, a step inside, a twist, and just like that, Chase was airborne. He hit the mat hard. Jamal pinned him in seconds. The gym went insane. Coach's whistle blew again. Carter wins. Jamal let go and stepped back unfazed. Chase lay there, stunned, his pride shattered. Jamal looked down at him. You done? Chase didn't answer. Jamal turned and walked off the mat. He didn't need to say anything. The entire school already knew. Jamal barely had time to process his victory before the consequences started rolling in. The next morning, the energy in the school was electric. Whispers followed him through the hallways, eyes lingering a little too long. Some students nodded in quiet respect. Others looked away. But Chase was nowhere to be seen. Jamal wasn't surprised. Humiliation like that doesn't just fade overnight. By the time lunch rolled around, Marcus was already waiting for him at their usual table. You know what they're saying, right? Marcus asked, taking a bite of his burger. Jamal picked at his food, unimpressed. Let me guess. Chase is planning something? Marcus grinned. Bingo. Word is he's not taking this loss lightly, and from what I hear, neither is his father. Jamal exhaled slowly. He should have known. Chase Tanner wasn't just some high school bully. He was the son of one of the wealthiest men in town. His dad, Richard Tanner, owned half the car dealerships in the county and had deep ties to the school board. Jamal had embarrassed his son in front of the entire school. That meant trouble. Coach Harrison was waiting for him after practice, his expression unreadable. You're making waves, Carter. Jamal grabbed his duffel bag, wiping sweat from his forehead. I just did what needed to be done. Coach nodded. Yeah, well, looks like Chase's father doesn't see it that way. Jamal stilled. What does that mean? Coach sighed, crossing his arms. It means the school board suddenly decided to review your transfer papers. Apparently, there's an issue with your residency status. Jamal clenched his jaw. They were trying to get him kicked out. Coach studied him for a long moment. Listen, kid, they don't like seeing people like you rise up, especially not when you make their golden boys look weak. Jamal met his gaze. So what now? Coach's lips curled into a knowing smirk. Now? Now you fight back. The next morning, Jamal and his mother walked into the principal's office. Principal Whitmore sat stiffly behind his desk, avoiding eye contact. Across from him sat Richard Tanner. The man exuded wealth. His tailored suit, his polished watch, everything about him screamed privilege. He barely glanced at Jamal before turning to Principal Whitmore. I believe we all understand the issue here. Jamal's mother folded her arms. I don't think we do, Mr. Tanner. Tanner leaned back, feigning disappointment. Your son is a talented young man, but Richmond High has rules. If his residency status is in question, we have no choice but to take action. Jamal narrowed his eyes. You mean you have no choice but to punish me for embarrassing your son? Tanner's smile was cold. Watch your tone, boy. Jamal's mother stepped forward. My son's records are in order. We moved here legally. You have no grounds to expel him. Whitmore cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Well, the board works for people like me, Tanner interrupted smoothly, and we don't tolerate disruptions. Jamal clenched his fists. This wasn't about rules. This was about power. Tanner smirked. Consider this a lesson, Jamal. People like you don't win. Jamal met his gaze head-on. We'll see about that. That afternoon, Jamal sat with Marcus in the library, scanning the school's handbook. There has to be something we can use, Jamal muttered. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You're really gonna fight this? Jamal looked up. What else can I do? Let them push me out? Marcus grinned. Damn right. They pored over the rules, and then they found it. A clause buried deep in the student handbook. No disciplinary action, including expulsion or removal from extracurriculars, may be taken against a student without due process, including a formal hearing with evidence provided. Jamal exhaled sharply. If they want to take me down, they'll have to do it legally. Marcus grinned. Let's see how well Tanner plays when the game is fair. The next morning, Jamal walked into the board meeting with his mother at his side. Across from them sat Richard Tanner, looking as smug as ever. Principal Whitmore cleared his throat. We're here to discuss the sudden concerns regarding Jamal Carter's enrollment. Tanner leaned forward. There's no discussion. The boy is ineligible. Jamal held up a copy of the handbook. Actually, that's not true. Tanner's eyes narrowed. Jamal smirked. Gotcha. He flipped to the clause. As per school policy, I am entitled to a hearing with evidence before any action is taken against me. Where's your evidence, Mr. Tanner? Silence. Tanner's face darkened. Jamal pressed forward. You have none. Because this isn't about my enrollment. This is about the fact that your son lost to me in a fair match, and you can't handle it. Murmurs rippled through the board members. Jamal's mother crossed her arms. If you expel my son without cause, we will be taking legal action. Whitmore paled. Tanner's jaw clenched. This isn't over. Jamal leaned back. Oh, I think it is. The board members whispered among themselves before, finally, Whitmore cleared his throat. Given the lack of evidence, Jamal Carter's enrollment will remain as is. Victory. Jamal stood, locking eyes with Tanner. Looks like people like me do win after all. And with that, he walked out. But he knew one thing. Tanner wouldn't forget this, and neither would the school. Jamal walked through the halls of Richmond High, his head held high. The air was different now. People weren't whispering about him anymore. They were watching, some with respect, some with fear, and some, like Chase and his crew, with pure hatred. But it didn't matter, because he had won. Coach Harrison called him into his office after practice. "Carter," he said, leaning back in his chair, "you do realize what you just pulled off, right?" Jamal sat down, shrugging. "I just used their own rules against them." Coach grinned. "Yeah, and you shook up the whole damn system doing it." Jamal crossed his arms. "So what now?" "Chase and his dad aren't the type to let this slide." Coach exhaled. "No, they're not. But you stood your ground, and that means something, more than you realize." Jamal frowned. "What do you mean?" Coach sat forward. "I've been at this school a long time, Carter, and I've seen a lot of kids like you, strong, smart, but always forced to play by different rules." Jamal stayed silent. Coach's eyes locked on his. "But you changed the game." Jamal swallowed. Had he? Or had he just delayed the inevitable? The next morning, the school loudspeaker crackled to life. "Attention, students, we have a special announcement from Principal Whitmore." Jamal looked up from his locker. Principal Whitmore's voice was stiff but clear. "After reviewing recent events, the Richmond High School Board has decided to implement a new student advocacy committee to ensure fair disciplinary procedures moving forward. Students will have the right to challenge unfair rulings and—" Jamal stopped listening. He could feel the eyes on him. He could hear the murmurs. They all knew. This happened because of him. Marcus appeared at his side, smirking. "Man, you really pissed them off, huh?" Jamal exhaled. "Guess so." Jamal didn't see Chase until after school. He was waiting by the parking lot, leaning against his car, arms crossed. His face was still bruised from the wrestling match. Jamal walked past him without slowing down, but Chase spoke. "This isn't over." Jamal stopped, turning slightly. "It is for me." Chase's jaw clenched. "You think you changed something? You didn't. You just made yourself a bigger target." Jamal met his gaze, calm. "Maybe, but I'm still standing." Chase's fists tightened, but he didn't move. Because he knew. He had already lost. Jamal gave him one last look before walking away. Jamal walked home that day, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. This wasn't just about a fight. It wasn't just about a school board hearing. It was about proving that people like him didn't have to stay silent, that they could fight back, that they could win. And as he stepped onto his porch, his mother waiting with a proud smile, he knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. If you've ever had to stand your ground, if you've ever fought against something bigger than yourself, you're not alone. Jamal's story isn't just his. It belongs to everyone who refuses to back down. So if you believe in standing up for yourself, in fighting for what's right, let's talk about it in the comments. Hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that matter. And remember, real power isn't just about fighting back. It's about knowing what you're fighting for.